I knew something was wrong before I even pulled into the driveway. You ever get that feeling where your stomach drops for no reason, like your brain notices something before your eyes do? Yeah, that. I'd been gone 4 days, just a quiet trip down to Gulf Shores. No phone calls, no emails, no stress. Exactly what I needed after 6 straight months of overtime at the machine shop. I came back sunburned, exhausted, halfway thinking about whether I had enough energy to unpack that night, and then I saw straight through my backyard, which was impossible, because for 7 years, there had been a 6-foot cedar privacy fence wrapping around my entire property line. I built that fence myself, every post, every panel, every bag of concrete mixed by hand, because paying contractors would have doubled the price. Took me almost 2 years to save up for it, another 6 weekends to actually build it. That fence wasn't decoration, it was peace and quiet. It kept my dogs safe, kept nosy neighbors away, gave me the one thing I moved out to rural Tennessee for in the first place, privacy. Except now it was gone. Completely gone. 200 feet of fence ripped out like it never existed. Panels tossed into a pile on my side yard. Posts snapped at the base. Chunks of concrete still stuck to splintered wood like broken bones. And in the middle of what used to be my enclosed backyard, a volleyball net. I'm not kidding. A bright neon volleyball net stretched right across my property while 3 kids ran around screaming and laughing like it was some suburban resort commercial. I just sat there in my truck for a second staring at it because my brain literally couldn't process the level of audacity I was looking at. Then I spotted my new neighbor, Damian Holloway, standing on his patio flipping burgers like this was the most normal thing in the world. Damian had moved in maybe 2 months earlier with his wife Elise. Both corporate types from Seattle, the kind of people who say things like curated outdoor living experience instead of backyard. The first time I met him, he stood at my fence with a glass of wine in his hand and said, "Don't you think barriers like this create unnecessary separation between people?" I thought he was joking. Turns out, he absolutely wasn't. Back then, I told him the same thing I'd tell anybody. I like my privacy, man. Fence stays. He smiled when I said it too. This weird little tight smile like he'd already decided my opinion didn't matter. Now here he was, acting like he owned the place. I got out of the truck and walked straight across the grass toward him. Didn't even shut the driver's door. He looked up with this giant grin on his face and actually waved at me like we were friends. "Hey buddy, buddy." That word almost sent me into orbit. I stopped maybe 10 feet away and pointed behind me. Where the hell is my fence? Damien turned around slowly, spatula still in his hand, and goes, "Oh yeah, we removed it while you were gone. The yard flows so much better now." Flows. Better. I remember just blinking at him because surely no human being says something that insane out loud unless they've completely lost touch with reality. I said, "You tore down my fence." And this guy, this absolute maniac, shrugs and says, "Well, technically, the contractors tore it down, but yeah, we figured once you saw the open layout, you'd appreciate it." Appreciate it. My dogs could have gotten loose. Somebody could have walked straight onto my property. The entire reason I bought that land was to avoid people exactly like this. I told him he had crossed onto private property and destroyed something that legally belonged to me. He laughed. Actually laughed. Then he pointed the spatula at me like he was giving a TED talk and goes, "Property lines are honestly just psychological constructs, man. People become territorial because they're conditioned to think ownership equals identity." I swear to God, for about 3 seconds I genuinely wondered if I was having a heat stroke. Then his wife walked outside carrying lemonade and added, "The neighborhood feels so much more connected this way." Connected? Lady, you demolished my fence while I was out of town. That's not community. That's a felony with patio furniture. I told Damien he had exactly 1 chance to fix this before lawyers got involved. His smile disappeared for the first time all afternoon. He leaned closer and lowered his voice like he was trying to explain something to a child. "Listen, Caleb, guys like you get too emotionally attached to objects. We already hauled most of the old fence to the dump. Cost us almost $1,500. Honestly, you should probably reimburse half." That right there, that was the moment this stopped being a neighbor dispute and turned into war. Now let me pause the story for a second because this is where people online usually split into 2 groups. Half the comments go, "There's no way somebody would actually do that," and the other half goes, "Oh, trust me, I've met people exactly like this." And honestly, the second group is right. According to standard procedure in most counties across the U.S., boundary fences are considered private property if they're built fully inside the owner's survey line and paid for by that owner, meaning your neighbor cannot legally remove it, modify it, or even enter the property to work on it without permission. Doesn't matter if they think it looks ugly. Doesn't matter if they believe in some weird utopian, shared living fantasy. The law treats that fence the same way it treats your garage or your front door. From a legal perspective, Damien didn't just make a rude decision. He potentially crossed into trespassing, destruction of property, unlawful entry, and civil damages territory all at once. And here's the part a lot of entitled people never understand. Confidence does not equal legality. Just because somebody says something calmly with a wine glass in their hand doesn't magically make them right. But psychologically, this gets even more interesting. Because this is a psychological trap wealthy, control-driven personalities fall into all the time. Damien wasn't trying to save space. He wasn't trying to improve the neighborhood. He wanted control over the environment around him. And when he realized he couldn't persuade me, he reframed my boundary as irrational so he could justify violating it. That's why people like this use language like negative energy, community flow, or shared openness. It sounds philosophical, but underneath it is the same basic mindset. I want something, therefore your objection is the problem. And trust me, HOAs are full of conflicts exactly like this. One neighbor decides their aesthetic vision matters more than somebody else's property rights, and suddenly everybody's in court arguing over fences, trees, cameras, driveways, even mailbox colors. The lesson here is simple. Boundaries only seem unnecessary to the person benefiting from crossing them. So after Damien hit me with that little, "you should reimburse us" speech, I just turned around and walked back to my house because I already knew two things. Number one, if I stayed out there another 30 seconds, I was probably going to end up on the evening news. And number two, people like Damien only understand consequences when they arrive on official letterhead. I spent the next hour taking photos of everything. Every broken post, every torn panel, tire tracks from the contractor trailer, even the scrape marks where they dragged sections of my fence across the ground like trash. My security cameras had caught part of it too. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to show workers walking onto my property while I was gone. Enough to show Damien standing there supervising with his hands in his pockets like some suburban emperor overseeing a conquest. Then I called my attorney, Rachel Mercer. Rachel's one of those terrifyingly calm people. Former prosecutor, razor sharp, never raises her voice because she doesn't have to. I emailed her the photos and security footage, and about 10 minutes later, she called me back. First thing she says is, "Please tell me you haven't touched anything yet." I said no. She goes, "Good. Because this idiot just bought himself a lawsuit." Apparently, the situation was even worse than I realized. The fence had been installed fully inside my surveyed property line, permitted correctly, taxes documented, contractor receipts saved from years earlier. Legally speaking, Damien had the same right to remove that fence as he had to remove my roof. Rachel drafted a formal demand letter that same afternoon ordering immediate restoration of the fence, compensation for damages, and written acknowledgement of trespassing. Pretty standard stuff. Most people panic when they get a letter like that. Most people realize they messed up. Damien? Oh no. Damien doubled down. 3 days later, Rachel gets a response from some overpriced law firm in downtown Nashville. 12 pages of polished nonsense, basically arguing that my fence had become aesthetic blight, affecting neighborhood cohesion. Neighborhood cohesion. Brother, we lived on 5-acre lots in the woods, not a yoga retreat. Their proposal was unbelievable too. Instead of rebuilding the fence, they offered to share landscaping costs for a decorative 3-foot hedge. 3 feet. That wouldn't even stop my Labrador from wandering into traffic. Rachel actually laughed while reading it out loud over speakerphone. Then she got very quiet and said, "Okay, now we go nuclear." She filed for emergency injunctive relief and property damages the next morning. And here's where Damien made the biggest mistake of his life. He assumed money automatically beats preparation. See, people like him are used to winning conflicts socially. They talk smoother, dress better, sound more educated, and usually intimidate people before things ever reach a courtroom. But courtrooms don't care about confidence. They care about evidence. And we had all of it. Survey records, installation permits, security footage, receipts, photos, timeline documentation. Meanwhile, Damien's legal defense basically boiled down to, "We thought he'd like it," which, surprisingly enough, is not recognized as a legal doctrine in the state of Tennessee. The hearing happened 2 weeks later. Damien showed up wearing this expensive navy suit with one of those fake humble expressions rich people practice in mirrors. Elise sat beside him looking deeply offended that consequences existed at all. And before proceedings even started, Damien tried to talk to me in the hallway. Biggest mistake he could have made. He walked over smiling and said, "Caleb, this whole thing feels emotionally reactive." Emotionally reactive. I looked at him and said, "You demolished part of my property while I was out of town." And this man actually sighs like I'm exhausting him. We were trying to improve the environment. Improve the environment. Like he was the captain of planet Earth instead of a guy who stole my fence. Once we got inside, Judge Holloway, no relation, thankfully, reviewed the photos for maybe 30 seconds before his whole expression changed. You could literally see the moment he realized Damien wasn't dealing with some minor misunderstanding. Rachel presented the property survey first, then the permit records, then the camera footage. Damien's attorney tried arguing that the fence contributed to social hostility between neighboring residences, which is probably the dumbest sentence I've ever heard spoken in a courtroom. The judge just stared at him over his glasses and goes, "Counselor, are you suggesting privacy itself is unlawful?" I almost blacked out trying not to laugh. Then came the best part. Judge Holloway looked directly at Damien and asked one question. "Did you receive permission to enter the plaintiff's property and remove the fence?" Damien hesitated, long enough for everybody in the room to know the answer before he even spoke. "No, Your Honor, but wrong answer." The judge cut him off immediately. "Then this court considers the removal unlawful." Boom. Just like that. Emergency ruling granted. Damien ordered to fully restore the fence within 14 days at his own expense, restore all damaged landscaping, and avoid further trespassing pending final civil review. You'd think that would humble somebody. Nope. 14 days came and went. Nothing happened. No contractors. No materials. No repairs. Damien ignored the court order completely because somewhere deep in his brain, he still believed the universe operated like a corporate boardroom where rules only apply to people with smaller bank accounts. Rachel wasn't even surprised. She called me the morning of day 15 and said, "Meet me outside at 7. Wear boots." I stepped out onto my driveway the next morning and nearly started laughing. Parked outside my property were 2 pickup trucks, a flatbed trailer stacked with black steel fencing panels, a concrete mixer truck, an auger machine, and 6 construction workers drinking coffee like they were preparing for battle. Rachel stood there holding a clipboard wearing sunglasses like the final boss in a legal thriller. "Since Mr. Holloway failed to comply," she said, "the court authorized reconstruction with reimbursement penalties." Then she handed me the updated paperwork, and that's when I saw it. We weren't rebuilding my old fence. We were upgrading it. 8-foot industrial steel privacy panels with reinforced concrete footings. Completely legal under county code because of the active property dispute and documented security concerns. I'm telling you right now, if Petty Revenge had a soundtrack, this moment deserved electric guitars and slow motion. The property surveyor arrived first and marked every inch of the legal boundary with bright orange flags. Then the crew got to work. Auger drilling into the dirt. Concrete pouring into fresh footings. Thick steel posts dropping into place one by one with heavy metallic thuds that echoed through the trees. And the whole time, Damien's curtains kept twitching. Around noon, he finally stormed outside wearing loafers like he thought expensive shoes were tactical equipment. "What the hell is this?" he yelled. One of the workers didn't even look up. Rachel calmly handed Damien a copy of the enforcement order while another panel slammed into place behind her with the sound of a bank vault closing. Damien's face went pale. "You can't build a fortress." Rachel tilted her head slightly. "Actually, county ordinance allows 8-foot security fencing under civil enforcement circumstances." He looked at me then, absolutely furious, like somehow I had violated him. "This is hostile," he snapped. And man, I had waited weeks for this moment. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "No, Damien, tearing down somebody else's fence is hostile. This is a consequence. You ever see somebody realize too late that they're not the smartest person in the room anymore?" That was his face. Pure panic buried under fake confidence. By sunset, the entire property line was sealed behind matte black steel panels tall enough to block every inch of visibility between our yards. No gaps, no shared openness, no community flow, just 8 feet of silence and consequences. And honestly, it was beautiful, but Damien still wasn't done humiliating himself. About 2 months later, he filed another lawsuit claiming the new fence reduced his property value by creating what he called an aggressive visual atmosphere. Aggressive visual atmosphere. That sounds less like a legal complaint and more like a rejected indie rock album title. The hearing lasted maybe 12 minutes. Judge Holloway barely let Damien's attorney finish speaking before shutting the entire thing down. Then came the final hit. Because Damien ignored the original restoration order, the court awarded additional damages covering construction costs, attorney fees, enforcement expenses, and part of my lost property use claim. In simple English, he ended up paying for the fence he hated twice. And the best part? Every single morning now, Damien drinks his coffee staring directly at 8 feet of black steel he legally financed himself. Honestly, I couldn't have designed a better ending if Netflix paid me. You know what's funny about this whole thing? People keep asking me if the fence was worth all the drama. And honestly, that question completely misses the point. The fence was never the real issue. The real issue was entitlement. It was this bizarre modern idea that somebody else's boundaries become negotiable the second they inconvenience your personal vision. And look, I'm not some antisocial mountain man hiding from civilization. I wave at neighbors. I help people move furniture. I've lent out tools plenty of times. But there's a massive difference between community and forced access. Damien didn't want friendship. He wanted control dressed up as philosophy. That's why the whole open environment speech always sounded fake to me. Because truly respectful people ask before they touch what belongs to somebody else. They don't bulldoze first and explain later. From a legal perspective, this situation turned into a perfect example of why property law exists in the first place. Boundaries prevent conflict. Surveys prevent arguments. Permits create accountability. According to standard procedure, once ownership is documented, violating that line becomes more than rude behavior. It becomes measurable liability. And trust me, courts take that very seriously because if they didn't, society would basically collapse into giant HOA gladiator matches every weekend. But psychologically, the most fascinating part was watching Damien convince himself he was the victim after causing every single problem. This is a psychological trap a lot of ego-driven people fall into. They confuse disagreement with oppression. The moment someone tells them no, they start rewriting reality so their own behavior feels justified. That's why he kept using words like hostile, negative, and divisive after literally trespassing onto my land with a demolition crew. Deep down, people like that don't believe boundaries apply to them because they view their intentions as morally superior. And that mindset destroys neighborhoods faster than any fence ever could. The lesson here is simple. If somebody peacefully sets a boundary, and your first instinct is to tear it down because you think you know better, you are the problem. Not the fence, not the rule, not the property line. You. And honestly, I sleep great now. My dogs are safe again, my privacy is back, and every once in a while I'll walk outside with a cup of coffee, look at that giant steel wall, and smile a little because it reminds me of something important. Respect is always cheaper than consequences. So now I'm curious. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have sued immediately? Tried to work things out peacefully? Or gone even further than I did? Let me know in the comments, because trust me, after this experience, I know for a fact every neighborhood has at least one Damien hiding somewhere behind a smile and a lawnmower.